Do you ever feel like you just don't have the time to sit down and read the news every morning? Sometimes things get so hectic you can't even scroll through your feeds while you're trying to get ready. A new podcast from Boise State Public Radio has you covered. I'm George Prentice, and I want to invite you to check out The Connector every weekday morning. You can get up to speed on all of the Idaho news you need to start your day without ever interrupting your morning routine. All you have to do is hit play. That's The Connector from Boise State Public Radio. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudet. At the end of January, President Trump's new administration put a freeze on federal grants. Then some of the money was restored, and now the move is tied up in federal court. Now, some of that money goes to help families and children through Head Start. That freeze hit programs in 23 states, including right here in Idaho. One Head Start program, which helps families in places like Nampa, Weiser, Wilder, and Donnelly, couldn't get the money into their bank account. Well, they found that money had been frozen. Now the move has alarmed Megan Wooler. She is the executive director of the Idaho Head Start Association, and she is here to tell us what happened. Megan, nice to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me, Gemma.
So Megan, remind us, what is Head Start?
Yeah, so Head Start was born out of President Johnson's War on Poverty in 1965. So I think the average Joe knows Head Start as no-cost pre-K for income-eligible families, but it's really a lot more than that. It has wraparound services, and it's really a whole child, whole family approach. So not only are kids getting evidence-based curriculum, early childhood curriculum, they're getting vision screenings, dental screenings. Parents are also engaged. So parents can be a part of their program's policy council, where they really gain leadership skills and have a voice in the governance of their program. They also work with Head Start staff on goals they may have. So I might be a Head Start parent and I may want to go get my GED. Head Start would help me do that. Also, Head Start isn't just serving kids 3 to 5, it's 0 to 5 with early Head Start. So that's that 0 to 3 range. So I could be an expectant mom and enroll in early Head Start and have a home visitor come meet with me weekly to make sure I'm connected to a medical and dental home, getting proper prenatal care, and helping me meet whatever goals I may have for this new baby and my family. And then when they're born and they're a baby and a toddler, that would look like working with me on developmentally appropriate activities to help their brain development, which we know that's so critically important when the majority of brain development happens before the age of 4.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what happened earlier this month, Megan, when the federal funding was frozen. How did you find out there was something wrong?
Well, I had the pleasure or displeasure of being in DC when the executive order came out. I was with about 400 other Head Start stakeholders, so Head Start staff, parents, other state association colleagues like myself. And it was a very chaotic energy, a chaotic moment that we were all in together, wondering what was going to happen, how paychecks were going to go out, and how families were going to have access to their programs. Now, it was a big sigh of relief when very quickly, I think it was, not even 24 hours, that the EO was rescinded, but at least for programs like Head Start. But we did start to realize that there were programs whose funds were still frozen. And then quickly we realized that YCAP, as you mentioned, here in Idaho, was the loan program of our 13 grantees here that couldn't access their funds.
Okay, so tell us about the program specifically here in Idaho that was impacted. What does it do?
Yep. So it does all of what I was mentioning earlier, full service, early Head Start and Head Start, but they serve about 465 kids and families. They have about 125 staff. So right when we found out that they couldn't access their funds, we had to act quickly. And it was very heartening to see all of the community rally for Head Start. We put out a post that listed 125 paychecks, 465 families. That post was shared almost 300 times in a matter of days. It was even shared in California. So it was definitely a bright spot to see people kind of just organically grassroots organizing and putting in the comment section phone numbers to call their members of Congress and their local legislators, the governor's office. Everyone was rallying behind this program. Eventually, they did get their funds last Monday, but to make payroll that previous Friday, they did have to use their reserves.
Okay, so even though the money is back, I mean, how did that impact not just the folks who, of course, needed to get paid, but the people who rely on this program?
Well, I think it was scary. I mean, not only is this an early childhood education opportunity, it's also, in a sense, many families' form of childcare. So if you're relying on Head Start, knowing that your kid's going to be safe and fed and learning in Head Start while you're at work all day, to know that maybe tomorrow that might not be the case. I mean, that's pretty rattling. I'm a parent and I would be rattled knowing, if my kids' childcare wasn't available. So it could have had a very detrimental impact.
Oh, and what has it done to this program in regards to the fact that they had to dip into reserves in order to make payroll as you were waiting for these funds to come back?
So they were able to draw down those funds after the fact. So I think that alleviated that issue of having to dip into their reserves. I think they're
Mm.
okay now. But we're just keeping our eye out on everything else that's coming through, all these other changes in terms of, DEI and the federal office of Head Start just started announcing layoffs. And programs have very little access to their contacts at the federal office of Head Start, which leaves everyone just in this kind of limbo and sitting on the edges of our seats, just waiting to find out, what's going to happen. And even though that we're technically safe in that the funding is unfrozen, it's still going to have a detrimental impact to programs when they have less access to their contacts at the federal level, because when they have fewer staff in the office of Head Start, that means that their operations are going to go much more slowly. And Head Start operates on a 5-year grant cycle. So we have many programs in Idaho who are submitting their grant renewals for the next 5 years. And when there's fewer staff at the federal level to go through all of that, and all of the other operations they have to do periodically and regularly, that's just going to create a whole backlog of work that isn't getting done in a timely manner.
How concerned are you? I mean, you mentioned Head Start at the national level is starting to do layoffs. I mean, are you concerned that we could see something like that here?
So in Idaho, we don't have any stake in Head Start. Head Start operates on a federal to local level, so it bypasses
Hmm.
states. So the grant funds go directly to the entities, of which there are 13 here in our state. So the concern isn't so much that, it's more just what I mentioned before.
So if you will have funding, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds like we have the funding. And I mean, the funding is at the mercy of Congress. So we can
Hmm.
only reach 25% of the eligible population in Idaho. There's a lot more kids than the nearly 4,000 that are being served right now that are eligible. But if we had more funding, we could serve more. If we had supplemental state dollars, many states in the nation do provide supplemental dollars to beef up their state's Head Start. So if we received state dollars, we could serve more kids. Funding is always on our minds.
What's your biggest concern after having gone through all of this in the last couple of weeks?
Just not knowing. And my state association colleagues and I have emails back and forth about, what if this happens? What if this happens? And we're just trying to stay positive. Something really positive that we're trying to look towards is, during the last Trump administration, Congress did increase Head Start funding. Now, I know the climate is much different than it was the last Trump administration, which makes it hard to be positive, but that is a bright spot.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in and talking with us about this. We've been speaking with Megan Wooler. She is the executive director of the Idaho Head Start Association, talking about federal funding that was frozen and how it impacted some one Idaho Head Start program. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Whether Boise State Public Radio brings a smile to your day, some inspiration, or a greater connection to Idaho and the world, we're proud to be here with you. Federal funding, about $1.60 per person annually, helps keep these trusted services strong and accessible to everyone in our community. Learn how you can safeguard local public media stations like ours by visiting protectmypublicmedia.org.